a silent explosion that unleashed radiation 400 times stronger than the Hiroshima bomb, turning a city into an uninhabitable ghost town within hours. The Chernobyl disaster isn't just a tragedy, it's a chilling warning about the power and risks of human technology.
Been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union at
Chernobyl's Reactor 4, the scene of the total meltdown.
That explosion at a nuclear plant in the Soviet Union.
Nuclear reactor in Ukraine's Chernobyl power plant.
Of explosions powerful enough to blow.
On April 26, 1986, a simple safety test spiraled into one of the deadliest events in human history. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, once a monument of Soviet progress, erupted into a nightmare that forever altered lives, landscapes, and the future of nuclear energy. Let's uncover the dark truth and heroism hidden within this radioactive wasteland. In the heart of the Soviet Union, nestled near the town of Pripyat, Ukraine, a quiet experiment intended as a safety test would soon unleash one of the greatest disasters in human history. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant was a symbol of Soviet technological advancement, a source of both power and pride. But on April 26, 1986, it would transform into something entirely different, a radioactive wasteland, a site of heroic sacrifice, and a chilling reminder of the dangers of nuclear power. As we unravel the story of Chernobyl, we delve into the deadly chain of mistakes that led to a reactor explosion and meltdown, the massive response that followed, and the human costs that linger to this day. A disaster born from a deadly chain of mistakes. The Chernobyl disaster began with a safety test gone terribly wrong. On the night of April 25, 1986, operators at Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant were conducting a test to simulate what would happen during an electrical blackout. The purpose was to ensure that, in case of an emergency, the reactor could be safely shut down and cooled without relying on external power. However, the test itself was built on a precarious foundation of design flaws, operational mistakes, and systemic neglect. As the operators attempted to reduce the reactor's power, they unknowingly set off a deadly sequence of events. The reactor at Chernobyl had a unique design. It was an RBMK 1000 model, known for its instability at low power levels. Due to this flaw, when power levels dropped too low, the reactor became increasingly unpredictable and dangerous. In an effort to regain control, the operators removed too many control rods, which were crucial for stabilizing the nuclear reaction. This led to a sudden, uncontrollable power surge. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26th, the reactor experienced a massive spike in heat and pressure, leading to an explosion that tore through the reactor building. In an instant, radioactive materials were launched high into the atmosphere, contaminating the surrounding area and setting the stage for what would become the worst nuclear disaster in history.
Пожарный экран. Алло, Иванка? Да. Значит, вы выезжаете в Припять? Алло? Да, я слышу. На атомную станцию выезжайте. Там 3-4 блок горит крыша. Алло, Полесская? Да. Вы, значит, выезжаете на атомную станцию, там горит крыша 3-4 блока.
The explosion. At 1:23 a.m. on April the 26th, an uncontrollable power surge struck Reactor 4. The massive spike in heat and pressure triggered an explosion that tore through the reactor, hurling radioactive materials into the atmosphere. In seconds, Chernobyl was on its way to becoming the worst nuclear disaster in history. In the heart of a radioactive wasteland, the explosion transformed Reactor 4 into a radioactive wasteland, with radiation levels so intense that even standing near the reactor for just a few minutes could result in deadly doses of radiation. Firefighters and plant workers, many completely unaware of the true danger they were facing, were the first to respond. They were met with a horrific scene: fires, smoke, and the unfamiliar smell of burning graphite, which was used as a moderator in the reactor. In the immediate aftermath, 2 plant workers lost their lives in the explosion itself. However, for many of the first responders, the real danger was radiation poisoning. Radiation sickness soon took hold of those brave souls who rushed to the scene to contain the fire, with symptoms including vomiting, extreme fatigue, and severe skin burns. Within 3 months, 28 more emergency responders succumbed to acute radiation syndrome, making them the earliest victims of Chernobyl's deadly reach.
I think, in a symbolic way, the sort of meltdown, the explosion, was caused by all the inherent contradictions in the Soviet system, and therefore it's a very good paradigm, if you like, symbol of what was to happen.
The invisible killer. But the disaster at Chernobyl didn't just end with the explosion and initial deaths. In fact, the real damage was only beginning. The invisible killer, radioactive contamination, began to spread, carried by wind currents across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and even as far as parts of Europe. Radiation knows no borders, and the Chernobyl disaster quickly proved that point. This silent threat contaminated forests, rivers, and farmlands, creating long-term environmental consequences that persist to this day. As radiation spread, so did the impact on human lives. In Pripyat, just a few kilometers from the power plant, residents were initially told to stay calm and continue with their daily routines. Many residents, mothers with young children, elderly individuals, and workers who had just finished their night shifts, went about their lives, unaware of the deadly exposure surrounding them. It wasn't until the evening of April 27th, a full day after the explosion, that the government ordered an evacuation. By then, 49,000 people were forced to leave their homes with little more than what they could carry in an evacuation zone that would eventually expand to 68,000 people. The long-term health effects of Chernobyl's radiation continue to haunt those affected. Increased rates of thyroid cancer, particularly among children, and various other cancers, have been linked to radiation exposure from the disaster. The exact number of lives impacted remains a subject of debate, with estimates ranging from thousands to tens of thousands. But one thing is certain: the people of Pripyat and the surrounding regions carry the legacy of Chernobyl in their genes, their health, and their memories, a testament to both human error and heroism. The response to the disaster called upon the strength, resilience, and bravery of over 500,000 people, known as liquidators. These individuals included firefighters, soldiers, scientists, engineers, and volunteers who worked tirelessly to contain the spread of radiation, prevent further explosions, and ultimately secure the site. The scale of this response was massive, a testament to both the extent of the damage and the extraordinary efforts required to mitigate it. The liquidators were assigned to various critical tasks, including removing radioactive debris from the reactor site, burying contaminated soil, and constructing the original concrete sarcophagus around Reactor 4. Many of these workers were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation, yet they continued their work out of a sense of duty, a shared commitment to protect their families and their country. Despite their efforts, the temporary sarcophagus constructed around Reactor 4 was only a short-term solution. In the years that followed, the structure began to deteriorate, leading to the creation of the Chernobyl New Safe Confinement. Completed between 2016 and 2018, this massive steel structure now encloses the reactor, preventing further radiation leaks and ensuring the containment of radioactive materials. This new shelter is a feat of engineering, designed to last 100 years, but the cleanup of Chernobyl is expected to continue until at least 2065, with ongoing monitoring and maintenance. Echoes of Chernobyl. The Chernobyl disaster left a lasting scar on the environment. Radiation contaminated vast areas of forest and farmland, creating an exclusion zone stretching across 2,600 square kilometers. This area remains largely uninhabitable, and wildlife populations have adapted to the abandoned landscape in unusual ways. The Red Forest, near the reactor site, named for the trees that turned a reddish-brown from intense radiation exposure, stands as a stark reminder of the contamination that took place. Economically, the disaster imposed staggering costs on the Soviet Union. The response involved the work of over 500,000 personnel and cost an estimated 18 billion rubles, equivalent to approximately $68 billion in 2019. When factoring in the long-term environmental, health, and societal costs, estimates for the total cost of the Chernobyl disaster soar above $700 billion. The disaster also led to significant economic challenges in the affected regions, with local economies devastated by the evacuation and the loss of agricultural and industrial productivity. How Chernobyl changed the world. Chernobyl changed the world in profound ways. It is one of only 2 nuclear disasters to reach the highest severity level of 7 on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the Fukushima disaster in 2011. The catastrophe forced a re-evaluation of nuclear safety protocols around the globe, leading to more stringent regulations and design improvements intended to prevent similar incidents. The Soviet Union's initial efforts to keep the disaster under wraps revealed significant issues within the political system. Misinformation, denial, and delayed evacuations highlighted the shortcomings of a government that prioritized control over transparency, ultimately costing lives and diminishing public trust. For many, Chernobyl was a symbol of the need for greater openness and accountability, marking the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union, which dissolved only a few years later in 1991. The cultural and psychological impact. Beyond the physical and environmental consequences, Chernobyl left a deep psychological impact. The images of deserted buildings, overgrown playgrounds, and abandoned schools in Pripyat have become haunting symbols of the human cost of nuclear disaster. The ghost town remains frozen in time, visited by tourists and scientists alike, drawn by the eerie silence and the opportunity to bear witness to the disaster's enduring effects. This psychological impact extends to those who were evacuated and to future generations who carry both the literal and symbolic legacy of Chernobyl. For many, the disaster is not just a story of human error, but a deeply personal tragedy, a scar left by a force that cannot be seen, yet changes lives forever. Chernobyl stands frozen in time, a testament to the devastating impact of human error and extraordinary bravery. If this haunting story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share. Join us as we explore more of the powerful stories that shaped our world and our future.